Oh, greetings. I hope this is working.
I can hear you, Jay.
Excellent.
Cool. Just doing a couple of little bits of housekeeping here. Figured I'd put some sort of a PowerPoint presentation, at least to kind of keep everything on track.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get my video to kick in here, but it's problematic on this system. This reminds me of the good old days when we'd all get together like a church meeting room or something like that and talk about whatever we were working on, Commodore 64s or whatever back in the day.
User group meetings.
Yeah. But this one kind of struck me because, again, the fan base of the Aquarius is so diverse. So James says hello. All right, let me try one more time to get this video started, and if not, then you just won't see me. And we'll give some other folks a little bit of time to join.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, are you there?
Yep, yeah.
Ah, hey, I got my video to work. This is what I look like.
Just start the video.
Hey, Jay.
All right. Good
Michael?
to meet you, virtually speaking.
Yep.
Good to see Michael as well, too. So are you in your, let's see what we have back here. Is it still going on back there? Oh, yeah. And a little demo from your fabulous Aquarius cart. And I know James is here, but I don't know if he's going to keep it on the down low or what. But he's always good to chime in the at least on the Facebook forums. I'm not sure how active he is on the Atari Age forums, but hey, James.
Oh yeah.
We see you, but we can't hear you.
Click the audio on.
I can't read lips. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll just let folks jump in as they get here. Okay, so while we're waiting for folks to join, I don't know how we got back to this slide, but let's try and go here. There we go. I'll just do it within a window. There's no surprises, so I don't need to do any fancy builds on PowerPoint. I hear somebody crunching in. Is that you, James? I see you're on mute.
We got a box join with audio. Or microphone join with audio.
Yeah. James, you can hear us, right? James, give us a thumbs up if you can hear us. How do I make it so you can hear me? I can hear Sean. Well, that's good. I can hear Michael. I can't hear Michael or Jay. Well, that's because they're not talking. Michael's talking now. Not sure how to get your mic to work. Depends on the system. If you're running that on an Aquarius, that's fantabulous. Let's see, anybody else yet?
Yeah, I had a microphone issue with Zoom when I started using it earlier in the summer, and the cause was kind of interesting. They had actually locked down my machine so much that the security settings were forbidding applications from accessing the microphone. There was nothing wrong with the device or anything like that, so I had to dig to find it. But I finally got it to work.
I see Max joined us. Good to see a picture of you, Mac, if not in person. Looks like James is still working on his mic. Oh, Max connecting.
Ah.
James is giving us an example of what he's trying to figure out how to plug in.
Hello again. Hello.
Oh, we hear you. Yay.
Excellent.
That worked for us, James. We heard you. Hi, it's Mac.
Hello.
Hello, Mac.
Can you hear me okay there?
I can hear you very well.
Fantastic.
Cool. All right, so let's see. It's about 1:06. We're about half here. Looks like we're only missing John, Gregory, and Roy, at least in terms of who has stepped in. So I'll take 8 people or 5 people any day over none. So, all right. So I assume you can see my screen. We'll kind of go through these. Welcome. It's been 37 years since anybody has even thought about having an Aquarius users group forum. Although I'm sure in the 3 or 4 months that it was out, nobody probably thought of it. Today, not sure, depending on how much feedback we get, but this is the general format. I'm not sure we'll go the full 3 hours, but for those of us who can't join until a bit later, and I know some of you folks in Europe, it's fairly late there, not super late, but a bit later in the evenings. So for the first hour, we'll kind of introduce ourselves. Second hour, we'll maybe do a little bit of show and tell, some of the stuff that we're working on or some of the things we're proud of in relationship to Aquarius. And then hour 3, if we get that long, we'll talk about some of the future states, where we can go with the platform, or even should we. I mean, it's a fairly simple system. A lot of people like it just the way it is. All right, so quick set of rules. Again, be courteous. If you're not speaking, make sure you mute your audio. No political or religious discussion. I think that'll keep things perfectly fine among everybody. Now, a recording of this event will likely be shared in other places. If you don't want any private information about yourself shown, don't show it, don't say it. If you do by accident, let me know, because I do have the ability to download the video first, and then I can either bleep those out or blur those out. But whatever you'd like, it would be fine. But I would like to see that we'd like to do this fairly regularly. Okay, let's see. Now, I think we all know a little bit of the history. If anybody knows any more details than I do, feel free to chime in. Generally, this little computer was released roughly in 1983 by Mattel Electronics, at least in the United States. It was designed by Radifin Electronics, which I believe is a Scottish company that had done a number of home consoles and other things. They'd already developed kind of a prototype unit, and then Mattel was looking for a way to get into the computer arena because of some feedback from, I think, the Federal Trade Commission on their Intellivision game unit. They had promised that there would be some sort of a computer system. So one way, and the FTC started getting consumer complaints that was the reason why people wanted to buy the Intellivision, which sounds kind of ridiculous to me. So Mattel was looking for options on how they could meet that home computer option. And as it turns out, the Aquarius wasn't an exact fit. They couldn't do what they wound up doing with the Intellivision by putting the separate console piece on. But they felt like the market was hot for it, so they developed this little Aquarius, or they had Radifin develop the Aquarius. And by all accounts, it was the best and brightest system of 1978. So it was a machine that was released probably 5 years beyond its shelf life. But it was pretty much on par with a lot of the other low-end systems that were out there. In the States, we didn't have the ZX Spectrum, but we did have the Timex Sinclair, which was basically the same system. Both of them ran on Z80 CPUs. And then a number of other systems in the world also did those too. Let's see, we've got a little comment here from Roy Templeman. Let me see what he's saying, because I'd like him to join us if possible. Keep saying that it is for internal use only and to log in with your company account. Not sure.
Just to
Shouldn't
say, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mac. What'd you say?
I was just going to say, when I tried to join the Zoom, it said it was for your registered account only, so the account you'd registered with. So, I couldn't use my Zoom account. I had to use the Facebook account that I'd registered with the thing. So just if that helps.
Okay. You have to use the email account associated with your Facebook?
I actually had to, because I think when I'd registered, I'd just clicked the link and it had used my Facebook account to register for it. So I didn't use the account, but when I tried to join, it then had to log me in via Facebook. So,
okay. I'm responding to him on that.
Okay.
Maybe through Facebook, question mark. The other thing I might be able to do is open it up and just let people join. At this point, they're not going to probably register. So then back to the little history. As we know, it didn't sell particularly well in the States. Mattel basically forced Radifin to buy the rights back from them so they wouldn't have to deal with it. And then Radifin actually went on to market it worldwide, particularly in Europe. So what am I missing, Matt? Because I know you know a lot of the history. You've been with the system since the very beginning.
You haven't missed that much, if anything. There really, it's pretty much what you said. I think it was due to, was it the Adam, the ColecoVision and Adam started out with a computer, and then because they'd advertised it, that's why they were getting the complaints that they didn't actually have anything. So it was the competitors were coming out with the systems, plug-in carts and stuff. And yeah, it wasn't sold for a long time. I remember I got mine for Christmas as a Christmas present. It was sold in the UK quite heavily out of catalogues, sort of Littlewoods and John Moores and Freemans and stuff. And yeah, it was. So I had my original one back in. I think I got it Christmas 82, 83. I seem to think it might have been 83, 84, but I think it was quite early. I always remember it was one of those things. You got the system, you open the boxes, and because it didn't come with leads or anything like that, and at Christmas trying to get a 5-pin DIN to 3.5mm mono jacks was not the easiest of things because they didn't sell them anywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my introduction to it. So yeah.
Cool. Anybody else have anything to add in terms of the history of what they know or have heard about the history of Aquarius?
Well, I'd say you summed it up pretty well. The exact release dates and the exact discontinuation dates are very difficult to nail down because I mean, if you look up the Aquarius online, you'll often see dates like, oh, it was released in June 83 and discontinued in October of 83. I'm not sure that's entirely correct. I think it was on the market, or at least in the sales channel, for a lot longer than that, because I've seen evidence that the Aquarius was still available in retail as late as late 1984. I have Aquarius systems with receipts taped onto the box, which have a November 1984 release date. That seems very late to be hanging around in the channel if the system was only discontinued in the late '83. And of course, that's only counting Mattel's discontinuation. I think Radifin itself sold the Aquarius for a few years more, primarily through mail order, as was said. Bentley Industries, Crimac, a couple other outlets sold them through the late '80s. So it was a very gradual fade out. It's very difficult to say exactly when it was available and when it wasn't. James asked an interesting question in the chat earlier: who owns the rights to the Aquarius games nowadays? That also is a very difficult question to answer definitively. When I was putting the AquariCart project together, that was something I was obviously concerned about learning more about, and so I contacted the first candidate that came to my mind, which was Intellivision Productions. And I got in touch with Keith Robinson, who at that time was still heading up Intellivision Productions. He's since passed away, but we exchanged a couple of emails about it. And according to him, it was unclear when Mattel sold the rights to the Aquarius back to Radifin, whether the rights to the Aquarius games went with it, because many of the games, as you no doubt know, were conversions of Intellivision games, Astra Smash, Night Stalker, etc. Mattel still owned those trademarks or those properties. So are they Mattel properties or were they Radifin properties at that point? He didn't know for sure, and according to him, even the lawyers who handled the Radifin bankruptcy when that happened in circa 1991, even they didn't know for sure. They didn't know where Radifin's rights ended up. So it's a very murky issue. I basically decided to go ahead with the release of the AquariCart without getting a definitive answer on that, frankly, just because the market was so small. But again, that's what I know about that subject.
And I'd heard for a bit, I mean, obviously the cartridges that were direct licensees, for instance, Discs of Tron and Dungeons and Dragons, those, as is kind of the case on older Intellivision stuff, you know, they can't really propagate those. They've gotten around it on Dungeons and Dragons by taking the D&D name off of it and giving a different name, like Treasure of Tarman or whatever they changed it, or Minotaur. But Discs of Tron and I can't remember the other Tron game, those are a little bit harder to include. Again, unless somebody's making a ton of money off of these, I don't think that the 5 of us or the 50 of us or however many of them there are going to care too much, particularly since a lot of this has fallen out. But it brings up a good point moving forward. I had heard that the rights went back to the British Crown since Scottish was part of the UK. I don't know if that's legit or what, but what's that, Mac?
Yeah, that's what happens in the UK. If a company goes bankrupt, basically all IP that isn't what's name goes back to the Crown. And
so then you have to ask them permission to use it moving forward, or
I think it just goes considering. As far as I'm aware, although it's not public domain, it is owned by the UK government, but they've got that much of it. I don't think they actually know what they've got.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and another complicating issue is the fact that Radifin, even though it was a UK company, they had a Hong Kong operation division. And it was actually that division, Radifin Far East, which produced the Aquarius. If you look on the Aquarius documentation that was marketed after Mattel got rid of it, you'll see that copyright, Radifin Far East. So whether those rights went somewhere else, who knows?
I believe Hong Kong was still part of the UK at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see if I can push Ray. Let's resend Ray his confirmation email. Resent email to you. Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks for kind of filling in the details for us, you guys. Okay. Next up, we're actually we've kind of tipped our hats a little bit in terms of who we are, but for the 5 folks who we do have, let's go a little bit around the table and talk about who we are. My name is Sean Harrington. I too got the Aquarius when I was much younger, probably in, I believe it was probably Christmas time '84, or maybe no, it was probably Christmas time of '83, January clearance sales, because some of the mall-based toy stores that were here in the United States, KB Toys, they were clearing out those units complete with the mini expander, the 4 cartridges. I don't believe it came with a tape player because I didn't get a tape player until recently. I was using an old Radio Shack tape player that I kind of hacked the cable together myself for that. I felt guilty when I finally got rid of the Aquarius. Well, I didn't feel guilty at the time because I was getting myself a brand new Macintosh SE, and this was probably 1987. But I probably donated it somewhere. But then about 2 years ago, I found myself getting really involved in the Commodore 64, which I also had as well too, and I did a couple of projects in that. But I didn't really like the community very much. There's some really great people, and I did find a couple, but there was an awful lot of, which is better, Gianna Sisters or this new port of Super Mario Brothers, and I really don't care. I'm just happy that those systems still exist. But with Aquarius, there didn't seem to be that overhead, and because there wasn't a whole lot of expectation about the system, I found the people who use it, like all 5 of you guys who I've been, or all 4 of you guys and others who I've interacted with, are generally really super helpful. So I like the community. And I was able to, like many of you, the first thing I did was open it up to kind of see what it looked like. And, it looked something like this, but I had no idea back, my 15, 16-year-old self was not an electronics engineer like I am now. So just had no idea what those things are. And it's been really nice to come back and understand how actually pretty simple they were. So that's kind of how I got back into it. So anybody here, just you can say as much or as little as you want to. And again, if you don't want to be recognized on this registered participants page, I can blank it out later on. But anybody who wants to go, let us know who you are, where in the world you live, your work hobbies, brief history about you and the Aquarius. If interested, the best way to contact you. Any of these questions you don't want to answer, feel free to just say pass on that. And then what you'd like to get out of this meeting. So anybody who wants to step up, go ahead.
Can I just apologize for it taking me so long to actually connect in the first place?
Absolutely. Roy?
Hello. Aye, sorry
Hello.
about that.
No problem. Glad to have you.
Just wearing the best t-shirt ever, if you can see that.
I'm jealous. It's hard to find those. I believe I bought your PAL.
You what, sorry?
I believe I bought your PAL Aquarius from you about 6 months ago.
You may have done.
Yeah, you shipped the micro expander with it as well,
of course.
too?
Yeah.
I bought that from you. So cheers on that. So we're just going through some introductions, and anybody who'd like to start off, here's some kind of some prompts on the screen. Offer as much or as little as you wish.
Well, I guess I'll start off. I'm Jay Snellen. I'm in the United States, the southeastern United States. I work as a full-time instructor at a 4-year university in northern Alabama. And I began with the Aquarius relatively late in life. I think I'm probably the exception in this group in that I didn't get an Aquarius for the first time until I was in my 30s. I do recall seeing one earlier in life, and those of you who have read the history of my development of the AquariCard, for those of you who actually looked at that, to put it briefly, I grew up with early home computers, including some of the more budget price systems at the time, like the TI 99-4A, Timex Sinclair 1000, etc. So even though I didn't grow up with the Aquarius specifically, I still had a lot of nostalgia for it because it reminded me a lot of those earlier systems because it had a lot in common with them. And when I finally saw one, this was at a secondhand computer store that I was working at the time. I I took one look at it and I mistakenly thought that it was a clone of the Sinclair 1000, also known as the ZX81. And so I gave it a pass at the time. But later on, when I started getting into the Mattel and television, and I branched out to the other Mattel family, I finally rediscovered the Aquarius, and I managed to get a good deal on one with some trades with another collector. And the system fascinated me for a couple of reasons. One is, and I think Sean was alluding to this also, it had a feeling of being, unexplored territory in classic computers. I mean, I had grown up with the Atari systems. Other people had grown up with the Apple II, the Commodore 64, etc. But the Aquarius had been relatively unexplored. There were some people, this was around the summer and early fall of 2010, there were some people who were active in the Yahoo Aquarius news group at the time who were doing some important work archiving the Aquarius cartridge library, etc. But other than that, relatively little was being done with it. And when I began to dig further into it, I wanted to get more of the cartridges. And I found that they weren't readily available. Either they were unavailable or they were very expensive to get because they were so rare. And so I said, well, let me try building my own. I had already gotten used to doing that on the Atari systems. Explored how to do it on the Aquarius, figured out that process relatively quickly. And I said, well, if I could build a cartridge with a copy of one game, why can't I do it with a cartridge with copies of multiple games? And so I built my first prototype multi-cart, which was basically a big old ROM with a multi-way selection switch on the top address lines, like many people have built in their homes. And I got a lot of interest in it from other Aquarius enthusiasts. So I said, I wonder if this is something I could actually make into a product, make it on a limited basis for people to buy. And then I started getting more feedback, and they said, well, we don't really want to have to twiddle the switches. We'd like to have a menu system and be able to select the game that you want to play. And that was a lot more work because that involved being able to control switching the banks in ROM in software. And obviously you needed automated hardware to support that functionality. I won't go into all the details of the development of the AquariCart. I'll be glad to get into them later for anyone who's specifically interested. But that led to two projects, one of which was the SuperCart bank switched cartridge board, which I needed to build before I could do the AquariCart, and then the AquariCart itself, which basically took all of the assets that have been archived by all the collectors over the years, including a few that I archived on my own for the first time, and I put them together and added documentation, help screens, and it just kept building on itself. And finally, I got to a point where I couldn't keep people waiting anymore, and so I finally released it in the early fall of 2011, as I recall. And I had a lot more ambitions for other projects that I wanted to do, but I ended up getting sidelined by work responsibilities when I ended up changing careers and teaching full-time. But I'm finally getting back into it, I'm glad to say, and I've got a few other projects in the works for the short to mid-term, and I'll be glad to talk about more of those later. But that, in a nutshell, is my experience with the Aquarius.
Cool, we're going to hold you to that. So, and apologize, I've got two cameras up here. I've got an iPad and my main screen. It's not to distract everyone, but I'm probably going to use this for kind of a walk around when I show some of the other stuff. So,
okay,
who'd like to go next?
I don't mind jumping in if you can live with a Scottish accent.
Oh, I love it. It's very relaxed.
So I am a Scotsman, but I live in England at the moment, in the south coast, in fact. Came down here with work actually a few years ago and blinked and had a wife, 3 kids and a mortgage. What happened there? So for me, so unlike Jay, the Aquarius was my first computer. So I'd never seen a computer before until one fateful day at my primary school when the teacher actually brought in a ZX81, which I was absolutely captivated by. I couldn't quite get my head around how you would just tap a few things on a keyboard and you could make a TV do stuff. you stuff that you wanted it to do, not just stuff that you would watch other people do on your behalf. And so I pretty much nagged mum and dad. But by that time, of course, it was what would it be, 1982. And what I said to mum and dad was, I really wanted a Sinclair Spectrum. So they were coming, they were advertised in all the magazines. I wanted something with a bit of colour in it, and I said to mum and dad that I'd really love a Spectrum for my Christmas, but I understand, I realise that they're quite expensive, so I would settle for a ZX81. So what happened then was my dad took it upon himself to go and track down one of these computers. And went to the local electronics store in the next town along, and when he started talking to the salesman about what it was his 10-year-old son wanted for a computer, what the salesman said was, "Oh, you really don't want a ZX81. You don't want to give your son a ZX81 because it's only black and white, and it has no sound, and it only has 1 kilobyte of RAM." None of these things made any sense to Dad whatsoever. However, what the salesman did say was, "What you want is one of these." And he picked up an Aquarius and showed it to Dad in the box, and he said, "Not only has this got 4 times as much memory," which to an electrician in the 80s is a huge amount, "it has color and sound, and not only that, you get a free game with it," which was Tron Deadly Discs, by the way. And so Dad did the right thing and bought this computer for I think they were, at the time, I think they just reduced them to about 50 quid, I think, 49.99. I think it was, they'd just been reduced in the UK because they, as we know, they weren't doing very well, and this happened to be right in that. I think it was 2.5 months into the 4-month life of the Aquarius. So the salesman really saw Dad coming, and so he bought this machine, and there it was sitting under the tree, ready for a 10-year-old Roy to open up on Christmas Day. As I said, the only game I had for it was Tron Deadly Discs. It was a bit hit and miss as to what game you got with it in the UK, because I think they bundled one game, and sometimes it was Night Stalker, sometimes it was Astro Smash if you were lucky, and sometimes it was Tron. It seemed to mostly be Night Stalker, so I suppose I was lucky to get Tron. Now, if it hadn't been, I think if the Aquarius had been better, I'm not sure I would be in IT today. My entire career has been in IT since that 10-year-old boy got to play on his keyboard on his Aquarius. And I've got 3 Aquariuses now, but one of them is still that original machine. I've got about 80 or so machines in the collection now, but I always look back on the Aquarius with fondness. It's still my favorite machine. It's what I call the B movie of my collection. It's it's so terrible, it's awesome. That's the basic premise of the Aquarius in my book. It's so bad it's now got a cult following, and you guys are a testament to that. To the point where recently, not to the degree that Jay's been doing with his Aquari cart, which is an awesome piece of kit, by the way, mate. I think I've bought about 4 of them off you by now. But recently I did release Aquari Worm on cassette, which is, in the UK anyway, probably the first game that's come out for the Aquarius since the 80s, certainly on cassette tape. So that's available and great. It's been brilliant fun doing it. I think everybody's got all the cartridges because they're quite easy to come by, certainly in the UK. I've got a few of the tape games. They're much harder to come by. And I've got very poor light at the minute, and I'll try and get better pictures, but I do have some kit set up. I've got my Aquarius set up, and I actually discovered that I was looking for my normal printer and actually discovered I've got the little 4-color printer as well, which is actually quite a nice little add-on there. Normally it's just a little monochrome one that most people see. So it's always been part of my life, and even at work, and even now as an enterprise architect, people still find it amazing that I collect 8-bit computers, and when I tell them that my first computer was a Mattel Electronics Aquarius, most people go, "A what?" Most people haven't heard of it. It had such a short life, and for Dad to walk into that shop at that precise moment in time when they were trying to get rid of them is brilliant. But I didn't care when I opened it. I didn't care that I'd never heard of an Aquarius. I didn't care that I'd never played Tron Deadly Discs. I didn't really care that was the only game I had for it, even when it was playing an active role in my childhood, because the games, by then it had come off the market and you just couldn't get them. So the only way I could entertain myself was to write my own games, and I lost track of the number of hours that I would spend on the Usborne books, which were all designed for the Beeb, the Specky, the ZE, and maybe an Auric if you were lucky. None of them were for the Aquarius, and so I spent many an hour converting them to run on the Aquarius, which was fantastic. So I just absolutely love it, and I'm happy to be in this group. It's great to meet people like you guys. I see that Max joined us with his mic turned off there, so I'll say hello to him when he shows his face. But Sean, I think you've done a great thing bringing us all together here, mate. To be honest, because it's unusual to find like-minded people, especially when it comes to what I like to call the wee blue key, because most people who are aware of the Aquarius absolutely hate it for no reason whatsoever. Personally, the things that make it so bad, in quotes, is what makes it truly awesome in my book. Who needs sprites? Come on, who needs sprites when you've got half a running man and a love heart? That's all you need. What more do you possibly want? Oh, fantastic.
Well said, Mr. Templeman.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
What about you, Mac? You want to give us some info about yourself?
Yeah, okay. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Aquarius was my first computer. It must have been the Christmas then of 83, 84, not 82, 83. So it was a long time ago. I don't remember dates, but I do remember it was a Christmas present under the tree. And it was one of those, exactly what Roy said there, that, sort of there was no games for it or anything in any of the magazines. So you had to learn how to write your own. I mean, there was the book. Is it Peter Good's book?
Oh, that's a great book.
Sort of, but obviously that came much later down the line because, we had no internet to search for things like that. You had to go to a bookshop and then look through to find out, sort of, have you got any books on the Aquarius? The what?
Exactly. The what?
For astrology, yeah, that's over. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a computer. Never heard of it. Hang on, let's look it up on this. Do you remember those things they had with the microfiche? Is it
a microfiche?
Yeah, microfiche. I used to work for B. Dalton Software, etc. here in the States, and yeah, we would have people occasionally coming in for those sorts of things, and I knew what it was, but there was certainly nothing in the book for it. So
yeah. So anyway, that's basically where I learnt. I originally learnt basic programming, which I then moved on to. I don't know if you guys in America had the Input magazines, but I'm pretty sure Roy will probably remember them.
Oh yeah, still got all of them, mate, in the ring binders.
Yeah, and basically they were a run of magazines. I think there was 52 of them or something like that, and they covered mainly the Spectrum, the 64. There was some Dragon 32 stuff in there, and what have you. But they also covered a little bit about assembly language programming. So I started teaching myself assembly, and I didn't do too bad. But I was actually teaching myself assembly by trial and error, seeing what each number did. And I eventually then went out and bought a book, which was Z80 Machine Code for Humans. And that basically, and that's when I started really experimenting a lot more with the technical aspects of it. For example, the fact that you could get sort of by timing loops and everything, which I think you've seen some of the stuff I've done, where you can get sort of the multicolour borders and everything. And I was actually able to get, sort of a colour resolution that was 8 times better than, or at least 8 times in the Y direction, better than the default. So you get some really nice rainbow effects and things like that. And that was just by pure software timing on the code and everything. And because of this is probably why I've ended up as a software developer for my entire life, pretty much. That's still what I do now. Times have moved on a little bit. For example, I think we had, was it 1728 or something bytes available. Now, an empty Word document wouldn't even fit into the address space of a Z80, never mind, sort of being able to load it.
Don't get me started on XML and JSON, Mike. Just don't get me started. JSON's the what's the name of my life, the bane of my life at the moment. I'm using JSON via OpenJSON within SQL Server.
Right.
Nice. Brilliant.
And you have to get it through a web service. So
absolutely. And that's when they tell you they want it encapsulated in XML. Oh my God.
Yeah. But anyway, ignoring the new technologies, yeah, it was, sort of, it really did get me started. And I did a lot of experimentation electronically with it as well, because I have to say, as far as these computers go, they're pretty bulletproof electronically. Having the static RAM instead of the dynamic RAM made a big difference. Because those dynamic RAM chips are quite touchy, and of course require stupid voltages, the 4116s and stuff.
Yes, they do.
yeah, I mean, in the 8 or so that I've gotten in the past couple of years, I've never had one come back dead. I had one that did, and that was an easy fix. The voltage regulator, the 7805, had come loose, and it doesn't work well if it does that. But
No,
other than that,
it's get a bit
pretty
hot.
bulletproof. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one chap in the group had an issue with one, didn't he, where one of the RAM chips had actually gone, which was quite unusual.
Very rare, yeah.
And that was actually quite interesting, because that then exposed how the memory was being accessed in it, because obviously there's 2 times 2K chips, and what they've done is chip 1 has the first K, chip 2 has the second K, chip 1 the third K, and chip 2 the fourth K. But that, yes, interleaved. The reason I guess they did that is so that they could pull the data for the video, as in the pixel data that goes through the character ROM and stuff, separately from the color data, because they're on separate chips. So that was my guess on that one. I haven't really bothered reverse engineering the PLA2 that much, but yeah, so that's sort of me. Obviously, I'm not quite as bad as Roy for collecting computers.
Bad?
Yeah. I mean, he has a B movie. I have a B plus movie.
Oh, I knew you were going to rub that in. One of the machines I've been after for ages is a bloody Acorn BBC Model B Plus, which is one with 64K. And Mr. Mac rubs that in my face every time.
Well, maybe collecting is a good point to go on. James, are you able to talk, or?
Well, miss is that when I'm talking, I can't listen. Did you just hear me say that, eh?
I did, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't hear you guys when I'm talking because I have to unplug the headphones. Okay, so you want me to go with my name? It's James Host, and I live in Southern California, United States of America. I like to say that I live in South Pasadena adjacent, because if I tell you that I live in Los Angeles, that will give you the wrong impression, because because I live within walking distance of South Pasadena downtown, and I do not live within walking distance of Los Angeles downtown. Let's see, work, hobbies, etc. I'm unemployed. Hey, I should have some hobbies, but I just sit around and watch shows on Hulu all the time. Okay, you and Aquarius, a brief history. Let's see. February 1984, there was a warehouse sale for a company called Galaxy's Computers. And they occasionally advertised in the LA Times newspaper. So I went down there, and for like $100, I got the compact bundle, which included the original ROM, Aquarius computer, and the printer, and the mini expander, and what else? The printer, the mini expander, and the tape recorder. Yes, that was good.
Did you get any games with it?
No games. No games were in this bundle.
Oh, right.
Oh, let's see. So that kind of sat in a box for. No, I played with it that summer, summer of '84, a lot, and I did my own poking of assembly language stuff into color memory, because color memory doesn't scroll. So, it's like that's a good place to put your short assembly language routines. Had a lot of fun with that. I learned assembly language from a book called Fast Basic, which was intended for the TRS-80. All right. And after summer of '84, the Aquarius pretty much went into its box, and I didn't do anything with it until around, sometime in 1999. Then I started writing an emulator for it, and that actually got pretty far. But let's see, it was up on Kenny Miller's website, which was also for his AQEMU emulator. Now, Kenny Miller got a takedown notice from, I think it was InTV, for one of the game ROMs that he had up there. Fun story, I dumped that ROM. Ha! Not him. Okay, and after he got the takedown notice, I got scared off, so that's the end of my emulator stuff. Okay, best way to contact me is through Facebook. And what do I want to get out of this meeting? Nothing in particular. It's just
I understand you have a fairly extensive collection. Is that true? Oh, wait, while he changes over.
hang on.
Yeah, I don't think you heard that. You're not allowed to have more than 80 machines, otherwise I'm going to have to collect a lot more. So,
James, I understand you have a bit of a collection with some interesting pieces in it, correct?
Not as interesting as some other people's, I guess. No, I just have the standard stuff that you can get off eBay, I think.
Okay.
does anybody have anything?
Does anybody have a 2?
What, an Aquarius 2?
Yes.
I wish, but no.
I wish. Yeah, I did put a sneaky bid on that one that went on eBay a few months back, but it was a bit too pricey for me.
I think we
The
all
one
did.
from
I think we all did. Yeah, whoever said that,
I
you're right.
certainly
I
did.
think we all did.
I booked out it, and if the wife had found out, she'd absolutely murder me. But I think it was about $2,000, something like that.
Yeah, me too. That's exactly where I was as well.
It was interesting for me, but not that interesting.
But saying that, look at those 2 tapes that went the other day. 68 quid.
That was
That's
ridiculous.
Ridiculous. It's
It
a
is. Oh,
cassette
talking about
tape.
tapes, by the way, guys, I got this one a few months back. I think I did post it, but when was the last time you ever saw that? That is Hen's Teeth, that game.
Oh my gosh.
Aquarius. Yeah.
Rally Driver.
Yeah, and it's I have digitized it, and it does work perfectly. But I didn't even know it existed. Found it completely by accident.
Let me guess. It's not one that prints 2 things at the bottom of the screen that move up, and it uses the print
The
to
random.
scroll the screen to do a bit like Spy Hunter on the Specky.
exactly like Spy Hunter on the Specky.
Yeah, I think we all probably wrote one of those games. It was actually in Peter Good's book.
I think everybody wrote one. I think the one I called was something like Bob Goes Skiing or something. I think we all did something very similar, didn't we?
Yes. And then the other one was Bomber.
Bomber, of course. Yeah. I don't think I wrote a bomber for the Aquarius, to be fair. I think there was a few of them going around anyway, and there was certainly in the Usborne books there was a few of them. Yeah. I do remember doing I remember doing a version of Iceberg for the Aquarius when I was about maybe 11, something like that, because it was a ball ache converting it from, I think that one was from Input actually rather than an Usborne book, but I thought I was doing really well changing it from letters of the alphabet to the extended character set. So I could actually make things look like an iceberg and a wee boat and and waves. It was great. Yeah.
Actually, just while I think about it, the one thing I did sort of forget to mention is where in the world do you live? I think Sean knows where I live because he's actually posted me stuff. But it's the Channel Islands. I'm a tax exile. In Jersey.
We sent you there deliberately, actually.
That's right. Him and Napoleon. All right, Michael, did you wanna chime in at all? If not, that's okay too.
I bought my Aquarius in about 83. It probably would have been in sort of Debenhams in Greens. I had it for the unit sale. And I think a few years later, I got we're trying to just type in a game, isn't it? They went to a computer shop and tried to load a cassette game. They wouldn't load properly, would it? Some of the cassettes wouldn't load properly onto the Aquarius. Then I got the mini expander, I think Snafu, something like that. The sort of joysticks wore out very quickly on the keypad.
See, I'm glad you called it a joystick, whereas they're actually terrible, aren't they? I mean, I'd prefer to use keys than these. It's like a poor attempt to the television.
Technically, it's a joypad.
Yeah, technically it is a technically it's a pad.
There's no joy in it whatsoever. It's completely
They always
joyless.
refer to it as a hand controller. That's what the documentation used. Yes.
I am still trying to get hold of a mini expander and the 2 joypads. I cannot get one.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I saw a mini expander on eBay just a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I'm not sure how much it went for because I've got a couple already. But
there was a mini expander on there. Somebody was selling the computer, and they sold the joysticks with the computer, and they sold the mini expander separately.
Dope. So that's somebody who doesn't know what they're selling. Yeah.
Yeah, because they sold the computer with joysticks, and obviously didn't realise that unless you had the mini expander, the joysticks wouldn't work. Stupid.
Absolutely.
I did email them about it, and they said, "Oh, it's on this one." And I thought, well, I'm not buying. I don't want to buy another just to get a mini expander anyway.
Yeah, we need a new clone of the mini expander made of new parts. That's a problem I'll solve one day if I have my.
We've got one.
That's it.
We've got one already called the micro expander.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Bruce Abbott's micro. Yeah.
That's the port for the
joystick lead on it.
Joysticks and obviously the AY chip.
Yeah.
And then all the funky bits that do all the ROMs and the thing with the USB.
Yeah, my main problem is that when unless you get one that's pre-ordered, you get something that looks like this. That no instructions, at least no good instructions.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
It's a great tool, but again, there's no bill of materials for it. I'd like to take the time to rectify it because I think it is a great tool and it's certainly a way to get.
I bought the boards for it. I bought and built it myself.
Yeah, right.
And I've actually got enough parts to build about another 10. I just don't have the boards.
Yep.
They do come up on eBay now and again, Mark. To be honest,
the Eagle files are on Bruce's site. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Just download them and get them made.
Did you know
I think
about
Bruce released the Eagle files and then the Gerbers, and then had somebody just made a bunch of boards and selling them on eBay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's another Roy.
Another Roy.
Thanks. Did you know, by the way, also, anybody who's got see if I can angle this, you can actually plug the micro expander. Can I get that? I'm trying to fiddle around in my camera here. It does actually plug into the mini expander, which I found by complete accident.
It will do, but that's going to be interesting because you're actually going to have two AY chips
Yep,
on the same
that's right.
ports.
Yeah, and
You have a
I'm
total
not
of
exactly
6
sure.
voices.
No,
I'm not sure.
I'll
I'm not
access
sure
them
which one's
separately.
taking precedence. It does only use one of them, but I've got no idea which one.
I would say it would probably, on output, it would use both. On input, you could end up with a data clash. So technically, I reckon it would be an OR result of whatever both chips are putting onto the bus. That would be my thoughts on it.
There they would be.
Yeah, what I would want to do with a new mini expander clone, first of all, I'd want to make one that you could install internally in the Aquarius, which would be nice, right in. And another thing is to make the sound chip, the PSG, mappable to a different hardware address, so you could actually have 2 independent PSGs for 6 voices for software that supported it.
That would actually be really, really simple to do, because I mean, for example, on this one, the logic decode is just done with a GAL 16V.
And a couple of TTLs in the original mini expander.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this one here, it's got there's a couple of TTLs on it and the GAL 16V. Mm-hmm. It would be really easy to do. The only problem with doing it internally is it becomes really, really awkward to fit, because you haven't got anywhere that is a good takeoff for all the data points, unless you sort of almost do like a something that would sit
various pi.
Well, I was going to say something that would basically sit, like a I want to say ULA plus for the Specky, but something that sits in the Z80 socket with the Z80 sitting above it, that you could then break out all the signals. But that would mean you'd have to desolder the Z80.
Right, and that's one of the approaches that I was thinking of too. A lot of arcade games that give either multi-game output or multi-game options with, of course, an on-screen menu to choose which one you want, or which ones that'll add save game states where they didn't have them before do exactly that. There'll be a little backpack card. And on arcade motherboards, obviously the Z80s are almost always socketed. On our little board, it's generally not. You do need to do a little bit of brain surgery on it to get that to work. But
yeah, I would probably socket the operating system ROM and put it there.
Oh, yeah.
That would give you most of the address lines. That would give you all the data lines. But even there, the headroom is very limited. And of course, you have to desocket the thing. One of the things that I found, perhaps your experience has been different, but one of the things that I found is that a lot of Aquarius owners are a little less inclined than other fans of other computers to tinker with the hardware. They don't like the idea of opening their machines, desoldering chips, and the like. At least the ones I've spoken to. So I sort of shy away from internal upgrades whenever possible. Fortunately, the modular expandability of the Aquarius through the mini expander is such a nice thing that if it's possible to interface something through the cartridge port, I generally, lean toward doing that.
Sure. All right, I'll tell you what. Time now is about 2 minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to take a quick bio break, and we'll come back at about 5 minutes after the hour for those who need it, and we'll talk about a little bit of show and tell on more specifics on what it is we're working on. Does that sound good?
Yep, sure.
Sounds
All right,
good,
see you guys in about 5.
All right. actually, Jay, you there? Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know if you encountered this, but you can probably see that's a specky. But
Yes.
if you look here, there,
Uh-huh.
it's a little, instead of the 8 4116s, it's a little circuit board that somebody's put together that just basically plugs into the sockets. So that's like something could easily be done using SMD type of things to replace, some of the chips if ever was needed.
Yes, yes. I had planned to do something similar, as I say, for the operating system ROM in the Aquarius. If I was ever to design a daughter board that added to the main board, that would be the ideal place to put it. One, because it gives you a lot of the bus lines that you need, and another is because that's where the headroom inside the case is the greatest.
Yeah. Key thing missing on that one though is the right signal.
Yeah, you'd still need to run some wires and tap into other signals. The audio signal certainly for internal mini expander.
Yeah. So, and if you have an internal mini expander, you'd have to drill the case at the back to get the sockets to the joysticks.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or you could just print a new 3D printed case. I'm up for designing that. That's easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you something. The person who did that designed the blanking plate for the the 3D printer file for the blanking plate.
Right.
That was very helpful.
Yeah, it was great because a lot of those get lost. I mean, about half of the ones I get when I purchase one don't have those in there anyway.
Yeah, the one I've got, one came with it, and one didn't. Because I was looking at it and I was going to design one myself, but I just couldn't be bothered. I've been spending my life at the moment making these little things. I don't know if you can see that.
What are those for?
ZX printer lugs. For the ZX printer to put the paper in. These get lost. And anyway, I've 3D printed them. And there's a guy on Facebook who sells the paper. And he keeps sending people to me for the lugs. So I might start sticking some on eBay.
I still wouldn't mind sending a block of these AV adapter cards to you and then letting you do the fulfillment to Europe and the UK, because a lot of the ones that I've sent recently have taken 2 months to get to their location. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Do you know, it's absolutely, what's its name? Because I ordered some chip sockets out of China, a couple of hundred chip sockets, and they were down within 10 days.
Really?
From China. And then you get other stuff, and it's like 2 months. Yeah. And my daughter ordered some, you've probably heard of it, Hype House. It's something to do with TikTok. That thing that's probably going to get banned over your side shortly. And she ordered some merchandise from that, and we got the dispatch notification, and it took 2.5 months to get here. Yeah. And it was like my 3D printer. That took 3.5 months to get that. It was just,
from where?
I ordered it from Banggood, and it was Creality Ender 3. And
Wow.
Apparently it kept getting stuck in the dispatch warehouse because they kept telling me my address isn't valid. I said, well, you send me stuff. You send me stuff normally. So anyway, yeah. So.
All right, so it looks like we're all back. We've gotten some beverages. I know it's probably
I had to go and get the right cup for my beverage. Can you see that? Good.
I had to get the right glass for mine.
Jay, you'll appreciate this. I've got one of my students was having problems with the IntelliJ Java environment because it's from my algorithms class, and something on their Mac tweaked, and now they can't get. It uses a special version of Bash to kind of prepend the libraries path or the assembly path. So looks like I'm gonna have to reset both. So let me do that really quickly before we get started. That was one of the things I never did mention. I was, in addition to my day job, which, let me clear this attempt. My day job is I work for the Ventura County Fire Department out here in California. I'm actually not too far. I'm probably about 45 minutes away from James. So that's my day job. So I've actually been back at work for about 2 months now. I did have about 2 months when I was out, but and then I do teach as an adjunct at California Lutheran University, and I'm fortunately I do have some downtime. I don't have any classes in the fall, so it'll be nice to get back to some of these projects that I'm working on. All right, so he's cleared up. Let me make sure.
It's probably been my worst thing, the fact that since I think it was March some point, I've basically been working from home and working literally here. And you sort of get to the end of the day, and because it's been your office all day, you sort of want to leave and go back into the house. And so a lot of stuff has just been completely sidelined because I've been, sort of I've spent the day in here. I don't want to then spend the evening in here doing, even though it's stuff that I love doing, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So
yeah, know exactly what you mean, mate. I'm exactly the same. I've been working from home since March, and of course, like you, I don't have a dedicated office for home working, so I've literally set up a table in the bedroom, which is exactly where that's also my little workbench for doing my retro stuff. And I know exactly what you mean. So, I think the only saving grace is that these days in my role, it's less hands-off. It's all the architecture side of things. So I do still enjoy doing all the electronic repairs to all the old machines. So I've probably done more of the repair work with a soldering iron since March than I would normally have done. I would normally have done the software side of things, but so that's quite enjoyable. So I don't know if that gives you any recompense, mate.
I think to be honest, sort of, at least it's nice in some respects that I have actually got somewhere, I can walk out, I can still leave work type of thing, which a lot of people I know have been finding very, very difficult, where they've just not been able to, I mean, one poor girl, bless her, she was really eager to get back into the office because she was in a 1-bedroom flat, and she didn't actually even have a computer. She had a tablet, so the work supplied her with a computer, and she was basically sitting there on a little poof thing with the ironing board as her desk, and that's what she was using. So it's amazing how we found out how many people don't actually have computers now. They just have tablets and iPads and stuff. It really has changed amazingly. Anyway, that's...
They need an Aquarius, mate. That's what they need.
Well, do you know, I was toying with the idea of just basically doing a Aquarius membrane to, through a Arduino to a Pi or something.
Yeah, to make it as a keyboard?
Yeah, USB, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, why not? They've done it with a Specky. I mean, if you want dead flesh as your everyday keyboard, then why not?
So can you guys hear me okay on this other device?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
So I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell for the stuff that I've been working on. Obviously, what I'll do is, let me see if I can flip this around. Yeah, that's it. So here we have, this is actually one of Roy's old boards. What I've done here is I've installed the Aquarius, make sure I'm framing it up there, okay. The Aquarius AV adapter board. And this is the kind of do-it-yourself version of it. It replaces the stock RF modulator, which you can kind of see this here on my breakout board. And this same device works on either the PAL version or on the NTSC version, which we have here. Let me see if I can get a little bit more light. So, and this is a smaller version of it, which I've done more surface mounts because people have asked for that. You can see it's even smaller than it was before. The challenge with that one is I actually had to go up a little bit higher with it because the surface mount jack is in there, but this is another one. One of the other mods that I've made here on this one in particular is this keyboard header. I put a regular set of angled pin headers in and then attached it just to the regular cable connector because that was the bane of my existence trying to fix those. And the goal is to eventually plug it into this guy, which is the mechanical keyboard version of it. Now there's no PCB on it yet. That's what I'm hoping to do, but it uses Cherry MX keys that will map exactly to the keyboard matrix that is on the chiclet keypad. Mainly because I would like to actually do some practical typing on it. So that's the Aquarius AV adapter, and then there's the mechanical keyboard.
Now, Sean, you've got to be a wee bit careful here, mate, because what you're trying to do there is actually make the Aquarius usable, and that just goes against the entire Mattel principle.
I know. It's cheaper is better, but I would like to actually make more use of it. So, all right. So while I've still got this around, here is my project board, which has all of the notes and parts for the NTSC version of the Aquarius. And the reason for that is I wanted to get a bare PCB, which we have here, for the purposes of mapping it into Eagle, so creating a schematic for it, along with updating the Miko design. Where is that at? Here's some of the ones that Mac gave me, but here's a small version of the Miko. And it's mostly right. It's mostly right in terms of the PAL board, but it's not anywhere near close to what's really going on the NTSC board. And I know I'm speaking from an NTSC-centric area, but kind of go with what you have, because I've got dozens of NTSC boards and only this one from Roy for the
What's
for
it
the PAL.
NTSC stands for? Never twice the same color.
Correct. Never twice the same color. That is true. But I'll leave that part of it to you once you and/or Jay or somebody else talks through how we can get a true RGB output on that. So plans for me is I do want to finish up mapping this board out. I do have a working version in Eagle. I do have what I want to do next is put the actual capacitor values. I've got all the resistor values in. So let's see here. Here's the back. And I'm actually kind of impressed by Radafin's layout, even though it's not perfect by today's standards. It's pretty rock solid. Here is the version of the motherboard that I'm working off of, which is a 5931-4229C. So since I'm modifying that one, what I'm doing is I'm calling it a 4229CA, just to kind of denote the difference. At some point, I'm going to have maybe half a dozen of these made, depending on how cheaply I can get them here. And what I want to do is, if anybody has the ability to populate one of these, I'd like to see if it's there. I'm going to do all the trace testing myself, so hopefully it won't short out anything. But if anybody has spare parts that they'd like to try, I'd like to do this and then actually publish this to the internet, both the schematics and the not only the Eagle files, but the project files themselves. So if somebody wants to go and recreate or to make some edits, then they can use that as a baseline. From there, I'll go ahead and map out the PAL system, again, taking it from what I've gotten off of this particular board. And there's really only about 16 or so differences between the two, mostly in this area, which is not populated on the PAL, and then this area, which is typically not populated on the NTSC. So you can kind of see there's a gap there, and here's where more of those are. But that's kind of what I'm working on.
Biggest kicker on that one is going to be the two PLAs. We've got to find a way of getting around them somehow or other.
Yeah, and what I've done is, and I'll show you on these. The problem with that PLA1 is the micro spacing, because it's not 0.1 spacing on the header. So I actually had to find, I can't remember what they call it. It's like high density or compressed pins. So I did find some, but these unfortunately aren't the right width for those. So I actually had to split one in half. So when I actually socket this PLA, I'll do that instead. But hopefully that will allow people who do want to do some in-case modifications could do that. So, but I don't want to tip my hat too much for the future state, but that's kind of where I'm at. What about you, Jay? Do you want to give a little bit of detail on show and tell for your stuff?
Sure. Well, the main project, my main project so far has been the AquariCard, but I suspect most of you probably already have one. So let me actually tell you a little about the project that came before the AquariCard, which was designing a new cartridge board for the Aquarius. And that's something I had to do first, because even though my first multi-carts were modified original Aquarius cartridges, like I would take a Snafu cartridge or something like that, and I would just pop the ROMs and then solder new ROMs in their place. But that wouldn't work if I wanted to, it wouldn't have worked if I wanted to scale up and make more of them available. And there are two reasons for that. One is that the carts were too hard to come by, and two, not all cartridges, original cartridges from Mattel, used the same boards. Some of them were traditional dip socketed ROMs, but some of the later ones were actually glop tops. They were surface mounted ROMs. Mattel had apparently just begun experimenting with that technology around that time. So you never knew what you would get. Even with the same game, you would sometimes get different boards inside. Yeah, that one that Mac is holding up now, that was used by games like Tron, some of the later games. Burger Time was another one. Melody Chase, a couple of the later ones. The older games, like as I say, Snafu. Let's see, Treasure of Tarman. Many of those used dip chips, etc. And then Night Stalker used a little tiny board that was the smallest of all, that used the glop top ROM. So there was a lot of inconsistency in the original board. So I basically went through my whole collection, opened up all my cartridges, laid all the boards out on a table, and I said, okay, let's look at what these have in common and design one new board that can fit into all the cartridge shells designed for all of these boards. So that was a pretty long process. But what I ended up with in the end was what I called the Super Card, which looks like that, if you can see it.
Yep,
This
got
is
the hole in the middle.
I'm sorry?
It's got the hole in the middle.
Yes, yeah, I put that hole in the middle for the cartridges that used the support post in the middle that had a hole for guides. I had these ones here for some of the surface-mounted boards, like the one that you held up earlier. Those didn't extend all the way to the top, so they couldn't use these support posts up here, but they used alignment holes down here. So I had to add them so that the cartridge shell could bite into them. So yeah, this is basically a combination of design ideas from all the various Mattel Radifin boards. And this board is designed to accommodate EEPROMs from 16K all the way up to 1 megabyte ROMs, or 8 megabits. So you can now have up to 1 megabyte of program ROM for an Aquarius cartridge. That's 64 times the original limit, which was 16K. So storage space is no longer an issue. So that's the ROM. It can accommodate 28 or 32 pin packages. You just have to set some jumpers to choose which ROM size you want. And then there's a couple of TTL chips here to do the bank switching. Now, interesting thing about that is that the original Aquarius cartridges were built using 8K ROMs. It had either one or two, depending on the size. And so what I did was I treated those as two separate 8K banks, and I configured the board to use them differently depending on which mode you selected. If you use 8K mode, what it would do is it would take the uppermost 8K byte bank in the ROM, and it would set that to a fixed location at the top of the Aquarius address space. So basically E1000 to FFFF. That's the address where the Aquarius bootstraps the cartridge ROM, and so I wanted that to be the fixed bank. And then the next lower bank, C1000 to DFFF, is another 8K bank which is switchable. So in other words, by writing 1 byte into the cartridge space using this cartridge, you can select any one of those 8K banks in your ROM, and it'll be mapped to that lower bank in the address space. So you can put your startup code and any other shared code that you want into the upper bank, and then in the lower bank you could divide into code, data, or some combination of the two, and then swap them in and out as needed for larger programs. So that was one of the modes. Yes.
Sorry, was there actually any of the Aquarius carts that were truly 16K?
Yes, a lot of the later games were 16K. Burger Time, Melody Chase, etc. A lot of them were 8K. I believe Treasure of Tarman, if I'm not mistaken, was 12K. So it used an 8K ROM in the upper portion and a 4K in the lower portion.
Okay.
So yeah, most of the games, at least the early ones, were 8K. So they only used one ROM. So that's one of the modes. The other mode is to be able to swap out all 16K together. And that was a mode that I added specifically for the AquariCart software because, of course, those original cartridges assumed that they had the full 16K available to themselves. And so I had to be able to swap out the whole thing. And so that was an alternate mode that I added to the cartridge. And again, you can switch banks using that mode in the same way by just writing the bank number that you want into the cartridge space. And so this was the first version of the SuperCart board. Again, it was designed to fit the original cartridges. It's still my favorite, frankly, because I'm rather proud of how the design came out. In retrospect, I would have made the sides a little bit smaller, but it turned out just fine, especially for a first attempt. But later on, of course, because of the scarcity of original Aquarius cartridges to use as donors, people started to complain, and of course my stock began running low. So I designed another cartridge, exactly the same design, just reshaped a little bit to fit a new cartridge design. And this is one that was originally designed for the Intellivision console. The guy who did this, Joe of Left Turn Only software, they're the makers of the LTO Flash multi-cart for the Intellivision. He originally had shells produced in this shape, but his first batch of them were upside down. The component side of the board was on the wrong side. And so he couldn't use them for the Intellivision, but it was a perfect match for the Aquarius. So I got a bunch of those shells from him super cheap, and I designed my board to fit into them. So that was this is the new, or the current version of the SuperCart 1, as I called it. Exactly the same design, just a different shape. Now I am working on a SuperCart 2. Which again is going to be exactly the same design. The only addition I'm going to make is an EEPROM. For a little bit of onboard storage in the cartridge. Just a couple of kbytes of storage for things like high score tables in your games, game settings, maybe a couple of game saves here and there, just so you have the option of adding a little bit of data permanently stored in the cartridge. But otherwise, it'll be pretty much the same as this.
Can we add something somehow? And I don't even know if this is going to be possible, but you know how NMI was always used by all the sort of like, you know, snapshot things and everything. I know the Aquarius doesn't handle the NMI. It's available, but unless you switch it, I think, into CPM mode, there's no way you can disable the ROM to do anything. Or have you had any thoughts about how you could possibly do that so that we could use that for doing sort of snapshotting and things?
Disabling the onboard operating system ROM. No, I don't think there's any way to do that because of the way it's designed, unless, as you say, you go into CPM mode. If you do that, that opens up the ROM space, and you could have another chip map into that space.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, because it's the one thing, because I was looking to see if there was any way of doing a snapshot device, and it just didn't seem realistically possible, because you can't even fit it in that that little 4K hole between sort of 3000 and 4000.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to suggest too, because that little 4K window right above the operating system ROM, that was reserved for extended basic in the Aquarius 2. And what's actually interesting is you can put a boot ROM in there. And you can also add that extended basic ROM to an original Aquarius. I actually built a quick little board that did the address decoding that took that portion of the Aquarius 2 ROM. I think Martin Steenoven dumped that for me. But anyway, I took that part of the ROM, put it on a little 4K ROM, and it worked just fine, even in an original Aquarius. And you can actually put a bootable ROM in there. So if you wanted to design a cartridge that used that space, you can actually plug that in, and that will take precedence over a program cartridge plugged into the slot. It will bootstrap the 4K ROM first.
Okay, that's interesting to know. I haven't actually, to be honest, I've not reverse engineered the startup code that much.
Yeah, that's basically what it does. It does a quick self-check, and then it checks for that 4K ROM. If it's present, it jumps into that. If it's not present, it looks for a valid boot ROM in the cartridge space. And if it finds one there, it boots that instead. Yeah, that 4K ROM space, my first plan for that was to build a development cartridge that actually puts a 512K SRAM in the cartridge. What I want to do with the 4K internal is have a little boot ROM that downloads data from a PC into that RAM for testing, so that if you have a bank switched game that you're developing and that you want to test, you just plug in that cartridge. The 4K will bootstrap the download process. It'll download into that SRAM and then run from the cartridge just as if it was on an EEPROM. And using the 4K would enable me to avoid any conflicts. That's one of my next projects, but again, it's something I haven't been able to get to. So that's the super cart. And then once I had that working, my first version was I think it was a snafu board with the TTL for bank switching on a daughter board that was connected with old floppy cables. It was a real messy looking thing. I still have it in my box, but it actually worked, and it was so thrilling when I finally got it working. That bank switching logic, by the way, was actually adapted from Atari cartridges. The Atari 7800 used a very similar bank switching scheme. So I made a couple modifications to it and basically borrowed Atari's design, since it was all TTL. I didn't want to have to use programmable logic. I wanted to keep it old school, so that's what I used. Once I had that working, I was able to develop the AquariCart firmware, which uses all 1 megabyte for the cartridge ROM collection, and also for the electronic documentation, mostly the electronic documentation, et cetera. Let me, I don't want to take everyone's time, but just to briefly introduce one other project I developed, which is a 32K memory cartridge, RAM cartridge. I put mine in a transparent shell. And this was basically a work-alike clone of the original Radifin design. They actually did release a 32K memory module in very limited quantities. I was able to obtain a brand new one very recently. I opened it up and took some pictures of the board. It was based on DRAM, so it was a very bulky design. I basically built my first version of this using a 4K cartridge. I took the old RAMs out. I put a 32K SRAM in there. It uses a 74138 decoder for generating the chip select logic, and a 7402 for partial address decoding. Very, very simple design, very inexpensive. But this solved the problem of getting more RAM for the Aquarius. And so yeah.
Did it become available to BASIC, the 32K?
Yes.
Because I always found that once you started trying to access above 8,000, you had to in BASIC anyway. If you wanted to peek and poke it, you had to start using negative numbers, the 2's complement. That was the only way you could actually access it.
Yeah, I noticed. I think that's a bug in BASIC. I noticed that if you report the amount of available RAM with one of these cartridges plugged in, it will give you a negative number. At least BASIC will.
Yeah.
So that does seem to be a bug. But yes, if you plug this RAM in, BASIC will recognize it, and so will Aquarius Logo. In fact, I often use Logo to test my assembled cartridges. That and the original Radifin diagnostic tool, which is included in the Aquarius card. I run that against my new cartridges for testing,
Mac,
although it
if
only tests up to the first
you've got
16K.
If you've got the micro expander with USB BASIC on it, they did actually fix that bug. So you can address the 32K, and if you do a print for EX, you'll get a positive 31090.
Mhm.
Yes, that fixed it, and also it was fixed in the special version of BASIC for the prototype 1541 interface. I included that on the Aquarius card as a bonus. If you run a memory check in there, it'll give you the correct amount. So yeah, that was another of my projects. Again, designed around the same time as the Aquarius card. I didn't release it at the time because I didn't know how much demand there would be for it. But it turns out lots of people were interested. So I made up a couple of boards and I offered this cartridge for $30. Again, it was meant to be a very inexpensive upgrade to solve the RAM problem for people who needed more. Okay. So do you want me to go into more details about the Aquarius cart? I gather all of you are already familiar with it, so I won't bore you talking about things you already know about.
Sure,
When's
go ahead.
version 2?
Volume 2, yeah, that's interesting. That's an idea I've been toying with for a while. If you notice in the about screens on the Aquarius cart, you'll notice that I put in Aquarius cart Volume 1.
Yep.
And because that's because at the time I had anticipated doing a volume 2, which basically took the cassette software that had been released by third parties on cassette and repackaging them in cartridge form to release that way, so that you could pick them from a menu, instantaneous loading, etc. I was thinking of adding hand controller to support to games that didn't originally have it, etc. That's going to be a lot more work because the games obviously are going to need to be relocated from RAM into the cartridge area. And that's going to be a lot of work because I'm going to have to reverse engineer the games after relocating the code, making sure they survive the transition, identifying writable areas of memory, relocating those back into RAM, etc. So that was one holdup. Another one was that I had trouble getting consensus on which games to include. And I also wanted to get archival copies of the original documentation that I could include as well, because a big goal of this project was preservation and making these things available in their best possible form to people who wanted them. So that's a project that's still on the back burner. That's something I might actually do at some point. My next project, which I had actually hoped to have available for this today, my very next Aquarius project is actually a new website. Because I've been gathering this treasure trove of scans, pictures of brand new specimens of Aquarius hardware, and I wanted to document all that on a website. So I'm busy putting all that together. I hope to have that live in the next month or two.
We definitely need a clone of Martin's site as well, because if that ever goes down.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a lot
agreed.
there too.
It's weird since it's for some reason it's blocked by our firewall at work. So when I need to answer a question, I can't even get to it from work. So
yeah, it's outside the United States, so that might be a reason. Yeah.
You guys haven't got the great firewall of the United States now, have you?
The
yes,
great
it's on our southern
firewall
border.
of the United States. Brilliant.
Well, that's the way they do it. You know, they lock everything down to the max, and then they let it open again if somebody complains. So
Right.
You have to request the site, rather.
Well, there you go, Sean. Just complain, mate. It'll be fine. It'll open up.
Yeah, just say you really need to access this for some course material.
That's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the AquariCard and the 32K module are my two main projects, at least the ones that are far enough along for me to say anything about them. But I've got a lot more in the works. I want to work on some development tools. The RAM cartridge that I mentioned with some sort of convenient USB downloading solution from a PC is one of them. The internal mini expander, AquariCard Volume 2, these are all ideas I've had rattling around in my head. Another one that's of great interest to me is a character generator upgrade. Having a way to add either more character graphics and ideally making the character graphics writable so that programmers can use their own graphics as in place of the ones that were built into the Aquarius. And that's
don't you think if you do that though, you're moving away from what the Aquarius is?
Yeah, that's an important issue, and that's something I've given a lot of thought to, because a lot of people designing upgrades for things like the Atari machines, they put ARM processors, they put megabytes of memory into a cartridge, and again, once you get to that point, I mean, it's possible to do today, but are you really developing for an Atari anymore? Once you've added all that, or are you developing for some hybrid system? My philosophy in designing upgrades is that you should always respect what the original system was. So in designing new graphic solutions, I already decided I didn't want to bring in like a graphics chip from something like the Ataris or the TI systems used. The Aquarius was originally a character-based system and it should remain a character-based system. But we can always add more characters in the same way that my bank switched ROM is still just a regular EEPROM. It just adds more. It enlarges something the original system already had. So, I mean, I certainly wouldn't design a game that would require more character graphics. If someone didn't have it, I should be as creative as possible with the characters that are already there. But it would just be a nice add-on for people who would want it. But again, that's one that would have to be installed internally because of the nature of the Aquarius. And that, again, would make it a hard sell in any case for a lot of people who don't want to open up and tamper with their machines. So that's more of a long-term project.
Cool.
It would actually be reasonably easy because I don't know if you know, but the micro expander actually has that in for, because Bruce did a version of that where basically he mapped RAM into the character ROM and then used the address space, because obviously it's only 2K of address space, used the address space of, going off the top of my head, I believe it was 280 to 3000. So, and what he did was copied the character set down from ROM to RAM, and then it was available in RAM. And if you poked, obviously with it being opened up, if you poked that address space, you could then change the character set.
That's interesting. I didn't realize he had got that working. The last time I heard, he was experiencing some screen corruption issues with that. Perhaps he remedied that later. It's a hard upgrade to do because the character generator ROM in the Aquarius is not mapped anywhere in the Aquarius address space. So you would, if you want to make that writable to software, the same chip would have to be mapped into both buses, and so you'd probably need some sort of bus arbiter to control that. I didn't get very far in my own design of that. I started designing the character graphics that I wanted to include, but that's about it. But that's the easy part, of course.
Yeah, there's actually, if I'm able to share a screen for a moment.
Sure. Let me do that. Hold on.
We've got, let me just, hang on. I'm just looking for a picture of something.
All right, Mac, I've made you the host, so you should be able to share your screen if you'd like.
Okay, share screen. Yeah, I'll stop your screen sharing temporarily. We're going to share screen. Screen, that one. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
That is Bruce's mod.
I remember that because he's replying to one of my posts.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I remember
yeah.
that, and again, I can see what he's doing there. What he's doing is putting a ROM in, and it looks like he's overriding the circuitry in there for serializing the character the character data, and it looks like he has a 245 there. I gather that's to isolate the buses.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
because we're coming off the PLA2 here, which is the feed for the video, down into this. I mean, it's quite sad. I actually know the video generation circuit of the Aquarius very well, because what I'm just holding up there is a FPGA. I've done an FPGA version of it.
Oh, great.
So, because that was my, and I used this because I understood exactly how this video circuitry all worked, to do an FPGA version of the video. But part of what eventually you're going to see from me comes on to, I've actually done, this is, didn't realize it was your post, but anyway.
Yep, that's me. Jaybird3rd is my my handle on Atari Age.
Well, basically, I've done a rework of this, that I've managed to fit it into a 16 V8 rather than a 20 V8. Just because that's the chips I happen to have, so I reworked the logic for it to do basically the RGB output.
Oh, great! Yeah, yeah, that'll be critical. And I think, Sean, I seem to recall digging up some of Bruce's files for you when you had asked about this. I wasn't sure if I had found his most recent work, but it looks like Mac has carried it on.
Yeah, so for me, I stopped at V3, kind of like what Mac has done, because it made the most sense. When Bruce went into V4, it went into an area that I wasn't necessarily interested in going to, because I wanted to keep this as simple as possible. And like Mac, I was wanting to go more into an FPGA realm with the goal of trying to get to a VGA output. But I don't know that that's practical or useful at this point.
Yeah, one of the things I'd love to get a hold of, I understand that some, perhaps the original Aquarius also, but at least the Aquarius 2, had some of them had a daughter board built in for a SCART interface, which would have a lot of the circuitry you would need for RGB generation.
Well,
so,
to be honest, I mean, what you've got here, these main signals come straight off the TEA chip.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the logic is just in there really to blank the video and stuff. And then we've got this extra little bit here, which mixes in the invert signal to take it from the 7 colors to the, from the 8 colors to the 16 colors. Hence why we've got a couple of the diodes and the resistors mixing into here. So basically RGB is actually available at the TEA chip. So, with virtually zero requirement. So you could almost unsocket the TEA and slap in a daughter card that basically, because I was wondering if we could get, the little micro 7-pin or whatever. It's the one, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Harlequin board.
We're talking about the mini DIN?
Yeah, the little mini DIN thing.
Right. Yeah, and I had been looking at, I think the one that the Dreamcast used. The problem is there are 3 different DINs with the same number of pins, and each one is in a slightly different location. It doesn't have to be the same thing as somebody else has used already, but I would prefer to have something that's fairly available in terms of standard stock. I mean, I'd like to be able to get it from DigiKey or somebody's standard, but I just couldn't find a port that was small enough.
Yeah, it was the it's a 7-pin micro DIN. It's used by the Harlequin. The Harlequin is the Spectrum home design one with the TTL ULA.
Yep.
And it's a very, very standard. It's about yay wide probably. And I was thinking it will fit in the hole that is there for the RCA.
Yeah.
So you could actually, but that would be, obviously a little bit more complex of a mod for most people, I think.
Right.
Well, just the same, I'm glad you've been working on that, because that's outside my area of expertise, certainly. But it's definitely necessary.
You know, so I've got actually this little board you can probably just see here. That's the board designed. I just have, it's been tested. I'm just going to fit it in internally. So that's just literally using a GAL 16 V8 and some diodes and some resistors, and that's RGB. Works.
And then you're taking it out through a SCART interface.
Well, at the moment, I hooked it onto literally a SCART cable that I chopped one end off for now, but I will be putting it. I'm going to fit the downside is I've got to do something a bit like what you've done, Sean, where I've got some riser board that I can fit a socket onto,
right?
To map up against the hole. But pretty much you can see from that it's pretty there.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. I'd love to see that through an upscaler like a FrameMeister through HDMI.
Right.
You know, so yeah, that's.
Mac, what would you have at the Aquarius then? Would that just be a DIN out from that and a SCART at the other end, or would you go
literally,
for
it would be.
Yeah, right,
I'd actually wire it the same as. I'll just do because I'm pretty sure he's got them on here. I thought he had them on there, which is because he sells them. It's the. I wonder if it's in the Harlequin kits. That basically.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Aye. Yeah, let's do that.
That looks a lot like the same DIN cable assembly that the FrameMeister uses. I don't know if that's how many people are using that, but it has the FrameMeister Mini, which is an HDMI upscaler, has a RGB input port on the front, and it uses a very similar DIN interface to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically it's like a 7-pin DIN or something.
Right. And the upscaler that I've got takes SCART in anyway, so that'd be great.
Yeah, and there's a SCART adapter for the FrameMeister, so SCART would be a good option.
Yeah, that's what the reason I was looking at doing it. Something I think you can just see there if we get the zoom on it.
Yep.
The reason I was looking at using something like that was I thought the cables are already out there, so you're not having to, so if you wire it so it matches something else. You don't have to go to the trouble of basically, getting bespoke cables made and everything as well, which becomes a pain in the backside, doesn't it? So.
Sure. Yeah, and then the other thing would be just trying to see if you could source the female that goes actually on your daughter card, because I know that's one of the problems that I had. I couldn't find any of those female pin ports.
AliExpress.
Oh, good.
You get anything.
So.
You get anything from that.
As long as you're prepared to wait for the first 2 to go missing in the post, then yeah.
I've not everything I've ordered from AliExpress has turned up. Never had
honestly, you're gifted. Yeah.
Maybe maybe the stuff I order is not weird.
Not weird.
Yeah, but it's actually something I was just going to say to Jay. There was I don't know if you can see that little thing I'm holding up there. That's the micro expander with the USB. Yes. But I'm using that, which is a flash air card. So it's basically a Toshiba.
Is it?
It's a Toshiba Wi-Fi SD card.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. So are you sending a ROM file straight across from your PC to that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
And then or a CAC file, because obviously you can load the the basic files and everything. Yeah. So you can just literally copy it from the PC over the Wi-Fi directly onto the card, and then load it from there. So you don't even have to unplug or anything like that. It actually works really, really well.
We might have to look at something like that as time moves on, because you try and find a very small USB fob these days. unless you want. Can you imagine what's that? How much space do your games take up on a 1 terabyte USB key? How big? Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I bought. And you'll laugh at this. It's quite sad, but I bought a batch of SD cards. Somebody was selling them.
That are all 2 gig or something, are they?
They were all 48 meg.
48 meg?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
A 48 meg SD card.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I know. And it's more than enough to cover anything you're ever probably going to use.
You probably got those for like a 5 pence a piece.
Somebody was selling them. They were brand new, and I got
Probably
10,
not.
They were still in the packaging. I got 10 of them.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different than brand new.
Well, yeah, still in the packaging, unopened. I got 10 of them for, I think it was £6.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant.
You know,
That's
and
awesome.
it's one of those, you know, when you just think, because it really irks me to
buy a 16 gig. And you occupy 5K.
Well, that Flash Air card is 32 gig.
Right.
It's mad, isn't it?
I know.
It's brilliant.
You know, I've got huge amounts of, because first time I went off and I bought a load of I wanted some SD cards, and I bought bloody micro SD cards by mistake, and I bought a batch of like 20. Because normally I just buy them in bulk because you get such a discount when you buy them from Amazon or something like that. You know. Yeah. But then anyway, I digress. Right, I shall hand this back to you somehow or other. I'm not quite sure how.
I just grabbed it.
Have you got it back now?
I do, I think.
Okay, it still says I'm screen sharing. So do I do? There you go.
Cool. And Roy, did you want to tell us a bit about your development process for your new software?
Yeah, I can do. I can't share any screens or anything because I'm actually down here in the kitchen whilst everybody's upstairs in bed now. So, which is where my main development machine is.
In bed?
But well, yeah. So what is it? Almost 11 o'clock. Yeah, the missus has gone up and the boys will be on their PlayStation. So you know, sorry, Xbox. They shoot me if I get that wrong. So yeah, I keep telling them. I keep wanting to show them a real game. You know, like Tron Deadly Discs. You know, that's the game. That is the ultimate game. Chucky Egg. Yeah, maybe not on an Aquarius, but Chucky Egg. Got Elite, of course. Don't get me started on Elite.
Which version?
Something else. I have all of them, mate. Every single one.
I know you do.
So development on the Aquarius. So we know that we've had great things like Aquaricart from Jay, and he's doing sterling work there, and it was fantastic to find such a thing. And it was only a few years ago that I found out that there was more than just the cartridge games for the Aquarius, because I genuinely thought that the only games that came out for the Aquarius were on cartridge originally, until I discovered that it did actually have its own unique tape deck. And then, of course, you do a bit of searching around when I started collecting some of these machines and realized that some of these tape games came out. Some of which I have. What have I got here? I've got Bounder. Came out on tape. What else have I got? Games Pack 1. I think there's a few. I think there's a 2 and a 3 as well. A few guys have got those. Ed-On, that's quite good fun. Came out for quite a few other platforms as well as the Aquarius. Pack Mister always makes me laugh. Some of these weird clone names. Pack Mister, brilliant. I wonder what game that is. Breakout and Aliens. And of course Driver, which I got fairly recently. So these tape games came around, and I had a look at some of the tape games, but they're certainly in the UK they're almost impossible to find. Mac might back me up here. I don't know what they're like in America. I don't know if they were more popular than the cartridges in your neck of the woods, but certainly here, if you could find them, it was only the cartridges. And for a while, I'd been thinking about writing a new game for the Aquarius, just to get something that would have a modern date on it, and there was a few games that had come out for a lot of other platforms that I think were missing from the Aquarius. And the thing that set me off really was I think it was a couple of years ago. I think for the last 3 years, I've entered in fact, it's on my cup. I've entered the 10-line basic challenge. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of it, but it's a competition that's held every year. And the premise is simple. You can choose any 8-bit machine you like. You're not allowed to use any add-ons other than the stock basic that comes with the machine when you turn it on, and all you have to do is write a game in only 10 lines of code. And what happens is everybody submits their games, they get judged, they create like a scoring mechanism, and there's not any prizes or anything, it's just a well done you type thing, and they have a top 10, a top 20. But as well as your submission, you have to actually write about how you came up with the game, what each line of your code does, because obviously you could use REM statements, but that'd be silly when you've only got 10 lines. And so I sent an email to them when I first found out that the competition was taking place, and said, look, I'd like to enter, and I'd like to write something for the Mattel Aquarius. But there's a limitation with the Aquarius. So your categories for the games, they had 3 categories. They had a 256 plus character category, a 120 character category, and an 80 character category. That's hard to say when you're Scottish. So you weren't allowed to use, I thought I'll enter the hardest one. You can't use more than 80 characters per line, 10 lines max. Now, as you guys probably are aware, the Aquarius only lets you have 72 characters per line. So right off the bat, I've got far fewer characters to play with than most of the people that are entering the competition. So I just wanted to find out whether I got any handicaps for that. They said absolutely not. It's up to you to choose the machine that you want to write for. And that was closely followed by, what's an Aquarius, by the way? which I found very amusing, given that these guys were rating all sorts of 8-bit machines, everything from it was all the common ones, so it was all Commodore 64, VIC-20s, Atari 4s and 8s, and CPCs. Nobody had written anything for the Aquarius, to the point where I actually had to send them a link to the Aquarius emulator, just so that they could prove it was a real machine, and that it had a stock version of BASIC. Anyway, so at that point, I'm trying to think what it was I wrote. I think it was like a little Space Invader game. So you were a wee ship that went along the bottom of the screen. There was a single invader that would come in at random speeds and at random positions onto the screen, and you had to shoot him. It's as simple as that. And then recently, I entered a game. I got in the top 5 with that one, actually, by the way, which I was quite chuffed about. But I entered again and did a slightly more sophisticated game, originally called Bomb Catcher, which again is the one that's on my cup, actually. If anybody's interested in the code, I'm happy to share it. And Bomb Catcher was another 10-line game where random aliens would appear on the screen and attempt to drop a bomb, and you had to then go and catch it with your little collector along the bottom. It's a nice, simple game, but again, in only 10 lines code. And that actually, a lot of people quite liked that. And I thought, well, how much effort would it be to actually write a more advanced game, a bigger game, a fuller game? And not only that, but to actually release it. So I started doing a search around for, had anything come out for the Aquarius fairly recently. And apart from the Aquarius cart, I think the only other thing I found that had come out fairly recently was BL Bird. I don't know if Jay might actually know about that. So it was like a Flappy Bird type clone to show off the new version of Basic that was coming out with. Well, I know of it on the on the micro expander. I don't know if it came out separately on a cartridge, but the BL Basic add-on, which gave you much more control and power over Basic on the Aquarius, and that was the only thing. And it had a very limited run, and it was only a ROM file. I don't think you could actually buy it or anything like that, and I couldn't find anything that had come out for the Aquarius. So I was keen to start looking at what type of games had come out for platforms of this caliber at the time, and I couldn't find a particularly good Snake clone for the Aquarius. There was one, I think it was in Peter Good's book though, but it was quite poor if memory serves. I think all they did was recreate the Vic-20s one. I think they're extremely similar. It's very character based, and I think you collect numbers, and the number that you collect.
I was going to say
you collect,
you put random numbers between 0 and 9, and then you as you passed over it, it extended it by that amount. I seem to remember.
That's it. And so that was around if you wanted to type it in. But I thought there must be it was too easy. I thought I'm sure I can do something a bit better than that. So I started playing around with how to control the character set on screen. I struggled quite a bit with the color control. Mac, I think you helped me out with that, if memory serves.
Yeah, and the screen clearing and stuff.
Yeah, that's right, because the Aquarius is very poor at those type of things, and Mac very kindly helped me.
A couple of little machine code routines.
Yeah, absolutely. And so basically that set me on a course to how could I package up something that would look fairly professional, and that in turn put me on to Chronosoft. I don't know if you're aware of Chronosoft, but they do lots of good work helping homebrew programmers to get things out on their original medium, so tapes in other words. So Chronosoft have quite a good website, but they tended to specialize in the more well-known machines. So Commodore 64, VIC-20, a lot of stuff on the Speccy, a lot of stuff on the ZX81. But over the last year or so, Sean, sorry, not Sean, Simon, who runs Chronosoft, put out a call to say he was looking to try and grow the platforms that they would offer for homebrew games. And so I sent him an email and said, look, I'm currently working on a game for the Mattel Aquarius. How would you feel about publishing that on my behalf? And as always, what I was expecting to come back was, what's an Aquarius? However, he actually came back and said, oh my God, I have an Aquarius. Wow, okay. And I've never seen a game for it since the 80s. So yes, please. And so together with Chronosoft, we came up with a I've lost my little, can't see myself at the minute. Let me move this over here. There we go. So we came up with a design. I'll get better lighting at some point. A design for the case, what the wee worm is going to look like, what the instructions look like, and we ran a couple of runs on actual tape to see if we get it to work. And it turns out we could get it to work. And I've actually since also done a ROM version, which Jay might be happy about. There is a cartridge version of Aquarius Worm, which you can get, and it's actually done quite well. I think they've sold around 50 copies of the game, which I think is brilliant. I was expecting it to sell 2.
The ones you bought.
Not the ones I know. I've only got 2 copies. One I actually genuinely bought, and they very kindly sent me tape 001, which was the very first run, which I've kept packaged up. which is great. And so because of that, I've started work on a machine code version of Bombcatcher, so a better, more advanced version of my original 10-liner, to see if I can do something like that. And they're extremely keen to then publish that as well. It means that the website on Chronosoft will then have 2 titles for the Aquarius, because right now I'm the only one there, which is great, which is a nice feeling. But it's great that there's companies like that that are looking to promote the homebrew market. I think between the sort of work that we do on the hardware side of things to keep these machines alive, and the work that we're doing on the software things to keep them interesting, I think these machines will never die. I think they're absolutely brilliant. And even though
I was going to say, I've got a Tetris clone that I've been working on.
Fantastic.
But with full AY sound as well. So
that's great.
And,
that's great. Are you going to self-publish, or are you going to? I might
do it through Chronosoft.
Yeah.
You know,
similarly, I've got one that I'd like to do that is that's a similar Falling Blocks type of game, except I wanted to in the honoring Fall of the Eastern Blocks, which I thought was a great game. I would like to make it a reactor is what it's called, and reactor in Cyrillic, in Russian, looks like peak top. So to us English speakers, it looks like the game's name is Peak Top, but it's actually Reactor. But for me, what I wanted to be able to do is pellets will fall into a reactor, but then all of the surfaces are at a 45-degree angle. So it starts out like this, but then they have to slide into place. So you get this kind of stacking mechanism. Mm-hmm. So that's my project, and that's why, Roy, I was particularly interested to understand what your development process. And
just call it Chernobyl.
What's that, Mac?
Just call it Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, yeah. That'd be too easy. I'm sure somebody's got that. Like HBO's probably got that tied up. So.
Yeah, and I have a Falling Blocks game in mind too.
Yeah.
Is that the
I have
big
a Falling
thing?
Blocks game in mind too,
games.
but yeah.
What's yours like, Jay?
Oh well, mine is going to be it's actually going to be, I'm going to do a 2D version, but it's going to be in a 3D perspective. So you can actually move pieces forward, backward, left, and right. And I'm actually going to do a 4D mode as well for 4-dimensional rotations. So it should be pretty freaky. And I'm going to do it all with Aquarius characters.
Well, yeah, mine's been done so the blocks are based around the 80 by 72. So
yeah,
you know, sort of done at that resolution. So it's something I've been working on. It's all in machine code. So you know,
lovely.
And I've been looking at ripping a couple of the tunes for, you know, sort of there's a lot of stuff in the PT3 or the whatever.
Yeah.
It's basically using.
Yeah, and there's a lot of PT3 stuff, mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it sounds good. I've also been playing with the idea of an infinite runner as well. So because I have to do a game with the iconic running man. So I'm experimenting with ground blocks and holes that you literally just have to jump over, and it's an infinite runner. And as the game progresses, Ralph, or whoever we want to call him, I was going to call it Run Ralph Run, and you just move closer and closer to the edge of the screen, and you just keep going until you die. So it was that type of thing as well. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. Well, cool. We've passed into the 3rd hour mark, and we've touched on the future of the Aquarius a little bit. Let me share my screen again. But each of you has touched a little bit on the future of where you guys would like to go. For me in particular, I've got my website here, aquarius.onestage.com. And I'm actually hoping that a lot of the stuff that I am not able to put on that site, once Jay's site is up, I can contribute to that as well too, because I do agree that we do tend to get evicted from our sites pretty regularly. We get, you know, comfortable in one particular group, and then you know, not everybody can access it, or we're treated like stepchildren, as we basically are on Atari forums. We even have a forum of our own. We have to share it with Intellivision. And they're a different animal entirely. But again, my future state is, again, I would like to digitize the boards so that anybody can use them and kind of take them as a starting point if they did want to add some internal hardware, so we didn't have to kill any existing motherboards. But I'll also probably create a case. Let me bring up the site to kind of show, and a lot of it's apocryphal to what Roy was talking about. Let me talk about my future state here. So here's current state of the replacement for the Nico diagram that I'm working on for NTSC. I haven't updated in about a month, but what I'd like to be able to do is, again, set this baseline design that anybody can use. If they want to download it, they can get it off of GitHub. I'm not going to go through the process of putting on to KiCad. I like KiCad. I like the fact that it's free, but it's already been a lot of work in the tool that I use. So anybody's welcome to kind of run with it after that. But I would like to be able to add some ability to update it. You know, I think that a lot of the stuff that's on the existing motherboard could be shrunk down easily to a lot smaller stuff, even without going to FPGA. But getting away, one of the things I'd like to do in addition to better video out, is getting away from the wall warts, because you're tethered to that brick. And I'd like to be able to use a more standard power supply without having to have these massive capacitors. And even that 7805, I've replaced it on most of mine with a switching version, which doesn't seem to cause any problems noise-wise, but I could be surprised someday. So I'd like to be able to do that so that all of the components are in a smaller space, and I could actually probably put like a mean well power supply that can give me cleaner 5, 12, and -12 within the case itself.
Well, to be honest, if you take out the RS-232, I don't think the -12 has any use in there at all.
Right. Well, I thought it did for audio.
The memory, is it?
No, the memory's 6116s, so they're 0 and 5. It's used on the RS-232. They might use it in one of the audio amps, but I don't believe so.
Huh, yeah, because that makes sense to me, because obviously I'm working on another project where I do have to pull up to 12 and -12 for the serial signal. But that would be great. You know, 5 is easy to get. You can do that within almost a postage stamp and get pretty clean power. You could even put like a LiPo battery in there and power it on the go if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Then you could just use a regular USB charger for that.
You could probably use a switching -12, 5 to -12 little, sort of diode pump circuit,
right?
To get the -12 out of it, because it's only literally used for the RS-232. And how many people honestly plug in a printer to their Aquarius?
Well, I'm working on it. Actually, with this other project that I'm working on, Star Micronics has this printer, which is about the same specifications, except it's not thermal. It just uses a regular ink. But its little modular serial plug is the full 2-directional version of what the Aquarius has. And I can write a new ROM to that to basically to not give any feedback on it and just take the output from it. So.
I've got this lovely little 4-color printer, which uses pens. It's like a plotter.
Oh, I love
Very
those.
nice.
I'm trying to, excuse me, while I try and angle this camera to see it, because I've got really bad lighting and I'm struggling with my Chromebook to get it round. Come on.
Yeah, those plotters, by the way, I believe that uses a printer mechanism from Alps, and it was used by a couple of manufacturers. Atari had their own version of that printer, the Atari 1020. I think Commodore had one, a few other companies too.
Neat.
So it's a bit like the Quick Disk then, isn't it? They basically jumped on the back of hardware that was used by MSX and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, has anyone got a modem?
Yes. I have 2. I have one of them new in the box, and I have another one that I had used one that I bought that I had to destroy to get the casing open because I wanted to look at the board. But yes, 300 baud direct connect modem.
Gotcha, and that's a cartridge, right?
Yeah. I think it was
It-
Bell
but
212 was the standard it used.
slightly longer cartridge, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, in fact, that cartridge and the 32K RAM expansion use the same case. If you look at a 32K module and you look very closely, you can see the footprint for the telephone port that they filled in for the 32K. So it used the same box.
Very cool.
Could you use the Wi-Fi card on the SD Wi-Fi card into the mini micro expander?
Oh, the way Mac's doing?
Yeah. Like the Wi-Fi modems they got for the Atari, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, okay, I see what you mean. The SD sort of, you're talking about the 8266 modules, that type of thing.
Yeah.
You probably could. You could probably easily use an 8266, actually, straight off the back.
I think, as well.
Yeah.
So who else has any interesting other future state stuff that we haven't quite covered yet?
Well, I've already tipped my hand a little bit on some of the future projects that I have in mind. And by the way, for Roy or for anyone else who's interested in producing Aquarius games, if you're by any chance interested in producing them on cartridge, let me know because I can help you. This board actually has the ability, the new version, you can use just a regular 16K program ROM with no bank switching necessary. And BL Bird, Martin's homebrew game, which you recommended, that or talked about, that was actually a proof of concept that he did for his BL Basic, which is basically, I think it adds a few statements, but it's one of the nice things it does is it acts as a basic bootloader from cartridge. So what
That's
you can
right.
do is take a basic game, which was designed to be loaded into RAM from a cassette, and you can create a binary image that could be run by BASIC directly from a cartridge. Now, I've run across a few programs that can't use it. I tried to convert Eastern Blocks for Jason because I wanted to make a cartridge version for him, and I couldn't get that to work with the loader because of some things he was doing in the program. But for most basic games, it will work, even with inline assembly. So if you're interested in making a cartridge version of that, let me know. I could probably rustle up some cartridges for you.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, and for anyone else who's interested too. So yeah, version 2 of my Supercart with the built-in EEPROM is one of my future projects. I guess my future plans for the Aquarius really fall into 3 broad categories. First is to get the website up and running. I really need to get that thing done and posted so that people can actually see what I've been putting together. That's something I want to have done in the next 2 months or so. I actually have a professional photographer who did some photography for me of the Aquarius hardware and software, so you could get really nice high resolution images for the website. It's not the same, scanned artwork that people have been recycling on the web for years. I wanted to have something brand new. So that'll be up in the next month or two, I hope. So that's one plan. Another one is to, of course, do a game or two of my own. In machine language using my bank switched cartridge boards. And from what I learned from doing that, I want to prepare a tutorial on Aquarius programming in machine language for beginners because there's a need for introducing people who have never done any programming before to machine language. And that's something that you used to see a lot more of years ago. Like, in fact, I don't know if anyone has seen this series of books called The Visible Computer. This is a collection of books, and there were many others like them, but they were, mapping the 64. I've got mapping the Atari. This one, it was written for the Apple II, the 6502. They did an 8088 version for the PC, and it's basically a book with lessons that also came with a monitor program that you could load on your computer for debugging. But they were written for general audiences, which you don't often see nowadays. Nowadays, books that talk about machine language assume that you're interested in being a hardware engineer or something of that nature. So they're a little hard for just casual readers to get into. But I'd like to write something that's more for general audiences, because as an educator myself, I find that would be, I think that would be helpful for introducing people to the fundamentals. The nice thing about the Aquarius is that because it's based on such a standard architecture, the Z80, which just about everything used, which is still being made today and still widely used in embedded systems. And because the Aquarius is such a simple architecture, very easy to get into, I can see an Aquarius be with the right lessons and the right curriculum as being a very nice entry point for people to learn about embedded systems programming in general. So I'd like to write a tutorial that approaches it from that direction, and which leads into my third long-term goal for the Aquarius, which is to actually build on the work that Sean is doing with his new Aquarius hardware, and actually repackage the Aquarius into an embedded systems learning platform. And there are several of these out there. This is the one that I use in my embedded systems classes. This is a project board which is based on the microcontrollers, the Intel 8051 series. For those of you who are familiar with that, the MCS 51. It's got the microcontroller itself. It's got a character LCD. It's got a touchscreen graphics LCD, buttons for input, LEDs for output. It has a matrix of I/O pins, so you can interface external devices for different experiments. And by twiddling the built-in jumpers, you can selectively enable or disable different features of the board for different experiments. So I thought it would be really cool if we could take like a modern Z80, stick it on a board like this one, take modern equivalents of the original PLAs for the Aquarius, add them to the board, add other add-ons, build a new display driver for a modern LCD, 320 by 240 display, interface it with the Aquarius hardware, and essentially build an Aquarius clone which can operate as a project board. And of course, you'd replace the ROM, replace it with a hardware monitor instead of BASIC, but leave the original routines intact so that if you had a cartridge and you wanted to play the original games on this new board, you could if you wanted to. I can see that being useful. And of course, the curriculum that I developed for the Aquarius itself will be very easy to retrofit for this. I can see myself using that in my own embedded systems classes. So that'll be a way for the Aquarius to live on in a slightly different form, because that to me is one of the real benefits of working with classic computers, because they're so simple and the internal architecture is so accessible. They're a wonderful learning tool as well, and I found that to be the case with the Aquarius. Before doing the AquariCart, I had never done hardware design before, nor had I ever programmed in assembly language for the Z80, and pursuing this project gave me the opportunity to learn both of those things. And if it can do that for me, surely it can do it for other people who are interested in learning about computers. So a board like the one I talked about, Aquarius project board, would be a more convenient form factor for exploring hardware for people who are interested in doing it. So those would be my three big goals for the Aquarius. And of course, making more games.
Yeah. And again, once you get that in there, I'll be one of the first to buy that, because right now, machine code is my weak suit. I've certainly lived with compiled and interpreted languages for most of my professional career because RAM was cheap. Hardware speeds were cheap. But going back, I would like to be able to do that. I'm pretty envious when Mac's able to do the things that he does. So that's the next part of it. So I will definitely buy that from you when it comes out.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's very difficult for people who have never done it to get into, because if you study assembly language programming on a modern computer, there's so much complexity with the modern
Right.
processors, modern operating systems. Someone who had never done it before could never get into that. So you would have to go with either a microcontroller-based design, which is very limited in terms of its application areas. But the Aquarius was meant to be more of a general purpose computer. So that would give you the accessibility of a microcontroller and the ease of the approachability, I guess, but in a more general purpose form. So I think it'd be a valuable addition.
Yeah, fully agree with you there. Going into something like x86 code now, you've got so many different addressing modes and all that sort of stuff. Your mind's blown before you even start, with the basics.
There's a high barrier of entry for people who want to learn it.
Yeah. The Z80 is, it's such a clean, easy to use processor. I mean, I don't know if you ever did anything with the 8080 or the 8085, which was the predecessor to it. But that, of course, used Intel's mnemonics, which were bloody awful, because they're the ones that are used by the x86. And Zlog decided, we're going to throw those away and make them to something a little bit more human understandable. So simple things like to put a value into a register, they called it a load. Intel called it a move. So in Intel language, you would, for example, move A, 30, which would put 30 into A. In Zlog mnemonics, it was LD A, 30. So load A, 30. So it almost made assembly a little bit more like BASIC to a very, very, very abstractly, but so I mean, one of the things I've written, and it's on GitHub, I did publish a link to it in the group a while back, is something that will take Intel hex compiled files and convert them into a basically what I call a CAC and a CAC-B. CAC-B is the basic loader, and then the CAC is the equivalent of the data file, how all tape games are done. So you can easily, very quickly, take your output straight out of a, as an IDE on the PC and put it into CAC files that you can then use straight into the Aquarius for testing and stuff, which is very handy. And it's also got the sort of like the auto relocation. So if you say, you want to put the base of the code at, say, for example, 4000, then it would quite happily relocate the code block to 4000 and then jump to it and start. So it's equivalent of basically what's used by all of the machine code games that existed in the past. So that's quite a helpful little tool that's out there. Obviously, Jay, you probably won't have seen it because not using Facebook. You'll have missed out on that one.
I'm behind, yes.
Yeah. You do also know that somebody has done a complete version of the Aquarius in FPGA.
Yes, I've seen it in the, what is it, the Mister? Is that what it is?
I saw something. I saw some of the files on Yahoo, on the Yahoo group.
Yeah, I've got.
I thought it was a Mr. Core. Is it not?
Yeah, I thought it was.
Might have been, yeah.
The one I was looking at was actually a straight onto a Cyclone 3, something like that.
Hmm.
So you can literally go straight onto. I mean, that's a Cyclone 2, but I've got a Spartan 6 up there that you could drop it straight onto that, and that's got obviously VGA out and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Obviously the downside, here's the big kicker with FPGA and Aquarius, is 3.3 logic to 5 logic. That's one of the biggest problems of, you've got to do level shifting with like a LVC 245 or something.
Right.
If you want to use any of the FPGAs, which is where the biggest problem of replacing PLA1 and PLA2 is going to be.
I'm not going to see a core for the Aquarius on my Spectrum Next anytime soon.
You might.
I might, yeah.
Like I say, I'm waiting for the KS2 to launch. I missed KS1, so.
How very dare you.
Yeah, I know. Like I say, I'm not paying the skanky prices people have been charging. And
it's ridiculous. It's still between £600 and £800 on eBay if you want.
I know.
If you want one. I mean,
ridiculous.
I think I can't remember. I paid $250 or something for the KS1 because I've got an accelerated one. I think it was about $250.
Yeah, you got the one with the memory, the Pi, and the real-time clock.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that just puts the time in the bottom corner of the screen.
Yeah, I'm way behind on all that stuff, hanging out on Atari Age, because I'm a moderator there now, so that keeps me busy. But I miss out on all the stuff that's been happening on Facebook.
Yeah, well, it's just talking about the ZX Spectrum Next, which was they did a Kickstarter for it. It must be 18 months, 2 years ago.
Longer, mate. Over 2 years ago.
They're now doing another one. So if you're looking for a Spectrum Next, then they're not changing it. They're just, I think Jim's probably run out of cash, so he's decided time to do run
Well,
two.
he needs something to fund Baggage in Space 2.
Yeah.
Well, one of the projects that's caught my eye, and I'm tangential to a couple of folks who are involved. That is the Commander X16 that the 8-bit guy started barking about 2 years ago. He's quite fond of obviously the Commodore 64, but he's released his games, and he was waxing fondly of his days programming on the Commodore 64 in both machine code and in BASIC, and he was hoping for a system that could have a little more elbow room so that you didn't have to get as creative with your memory mapping as a lot of people have had to. So they've got this Commander X16 project. What's that?
That was the fun. The
Oh, I know.
memory management, trying to make stuff fit when every byte mattered, and
Every byte does matter.
yeah.
Well, it does, but it would also be good
every
if
cycle mattered.
it would be great if there were tools on some of these retro machines that didn't require as much creative memory mapping as a starting point for young programmers. I'd like to.
Do you mean lazy? Lazy.
Well, fair enough. But when you can do it on what is it? Microsoft's new code base, Team Studio or whatever. There's nothing that's going to draw them to the old hardware, and I think that there's a lot to be learned there, as Jay suggested. So, not suggesting that we would do that with, say, an Aquarius 3, or I don't know, what would our clever name for it be? The Water Boy or something like that?
Aquarius Next.
Aquarius Next.
I was going to say that. You beat me to it. I was going to say the Aquarius Next.
Or the next Aquarius.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Or the Aquarius what?
Aquarius what now?
So, all right. Anything else from the rest of the folks? Okay. All right. Well, we've
Michael, you need to wave or something, mate. Either that, or you've frozen. There we go. Right.
There, he's chimed in a couple times. Well, so what I'll do is after this video processes, I'll get the ability to download along with the transcript. If there's anything in here that what I can do is I can make it available just to this group so you can take a look at it. If there's anything that you don't want me to kind of publish to everybody, and I may break it up into chunks because I don't know how much Facebook or YouTube is going to appreciate a 3-hour video, so I may break it up into separate bits. But if there's anything that you guys don't want me to publish to everybody, let me know. Send me a little email. My email address is on screen here. I'll blip those out, or I'll fade anything that you guys don't want. But I think this is a good demonstration to the rest of the community that there's a forum for this. And I think that even though we're thousands of miles apart, most of us, except for James and I, we're only about 40 miles apart. I think that there's an ability to do this. And the next time we do this, we'll do it more on Mac, Roy, and Michael's time frame rather than ours, because we have the benefit of being only about 3 in the afternoon here, and you guys are approaching midnight. So.
Yeah, but we're sort of computery geeks, so
right.
We don't go to bed.
You're up anyway. Yeah.
We don't travel through time in the same way normal people do. It's completely
mixed over.
Good.
No way.
All right. If that's it, then thank you guys very much for joining. We'll see if we can do this again at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to get some sort of a forum together so we can get folks who aren't necessarily Facebook centric, people like Jay, we can hold him to his promise of having that website up.
Jay, how did we actually get you involved with this anyway then? If you're not on Facebook, how did you know about Sean's meeting? How do you know about that?
Oh, well, Sean came over to Atari Age, as I recall.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because that's pretty much as close as I get to social media. I'm not on Twitter either, although I did create a account with the handle Mattel Aquarius, and I'm using that. I'm going to use that to post updates to my website when it goes live. So that's my my limit of social media. But yes, depending on when you schedule the next meeting, by the time we come back, I hope to have the website live before we meet again.
Good.
That's right, because I saw somebody suggesting that you posted it in the Intellivision forum on Atari Age. Yeah, so that's probably, you'd have picked it up from there.
Has anyone got a sort of diagram of the printer cable at all? Or the
The printer cable, isn't it just a jack lead?
It's a 3.5 stereo jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's on the Aquarius side. There's a mini jack and a full jack, isn't it? Mono jack on it.
Oh, to the actual printer.
Yeah.
I've never actually seen the Aquarius printer, so I would assume it would have to still be a 3-pin stereo jack on that side at least.
Yeah, it's a Y cable. There's 3.5 stereo on the Aquarius side, and then on the printer side, there's a 3.5 mono and a 2.5 mono, I believe.
A bit like the old REM sockets on the tape decks.
Yeah, one of them for receive, and one of them for
it'll be CTS, clear to send.
Yes. Clear to send.
Are you talking about the thermal printer? Because I'm just looking on the back of my little color printer, and it's only it's a single 2.5 on that.
That might be a different cable. Yeah. Martin's website has a pinout for the thermal printer. I know that for sure. And I know he also provided a pinout so you could build a cable for DIN 9 for RS-232 on the PC side.
Well, I was going to say the tip, just for the thing on the actual Aquarius, the tip is TX and the ring is CTS, and the obviously the bottom bit's ground.
Yeah, it's just the printer side. I was more sort of trying to link up with that side of it. We've got lots of pointy leads to fit in the holes, but just what was into which part of the printer side of it.
So, Mac, you said tip was transmit, middle was CTS, and bottom was ground?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, that's it. I appreciate you guys, and we'll look forward to the next time. I'll try and make it, who knows, maybe in a couple months after it cools down here in the States.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together. This is the first opportunity I've had to talk face-to-face with other hobbyists, so it's been a treat for me.
Yeah, same way.
And there's very few of us in the world. It obviously shows for this.
Yes,
there is
alas,
a few of us in the world. I mean, I do talk to other people about other machines, certainly the more popular ones. But to actually meet a group of people who A, know what an Aquarius is, and B, is actually doing stuff to keep it alive is fantastic. So thank you, Sean. It's been great, mate.
Yeah,
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All righty, thanks all.